At the pinnacle of his power, a man risks losing control. The world is not kind, so its kings become cruel. Murder is never mercy, it's never noble, and it's never redeemable. To the maniac, murder is an art form.
What is happening to God say something?
Welcome back to Visited by Voices Live. It is Monday. What is today? Today is, oh my God, the 20th. It's like this month is already gone. I am joined today by one of the most requested figures from the former Sausage Factory, now Region Free. I can say that name now. Feels good to not dance around it anymore. When I joined the show, one of my first shows I was on was actually one of the last of this guest before he took a hiatus off the show. Thankfully, this last season, he came back and rejoined us for several episodes, and I was overjoyed to actually really get to know him better than our just brief initial meeting. I'm speaking, of course, of the great B-Movie Mike. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Hey, man, what's up? Doing good.
That's good to hear. You don't hear it enough these days. So we, of course, crossed paths early in, I guess, 2018. And then again, last year in 2019, we were on some of the same shows. And I always felt that it was a little bit like I had backup, or maybe I was your backup. I'm not sure which, but it's good to see you and have another like-minded person of roughly the same age and the exact same haircut.
Well, I'm the OG, though. I got you by a few years.
A few years, man. But that just means I'll have a few years to catch up.
But yeah, I kind of felt the same way. It was nice to have backup come in. I was feeling like an island unto myself there for a while. Not in a completely bad way. It was a lot of fun. The show was always fun. I have no regrets about it. Our discussions were always a good time. Sometimes they seemed to be more heated than what they really were. But it was nice to have backup at least, so I didn't feel so alone. Although being alone's okay with me.
Yeah, most of the time it is for me too.
Quiet.
So I know that you've been on the radar of a lot of what I'm going to call my audience now, but because I inherited a lot of the audience from the show we share. But I want to go over just a few things that perhaps those newer to the show and to you would not particularly know. So what was it that first got you into horror?
Oh, man. I grew up in the extreme northwest corner of Indiana. So everything about my childhood was Chicago. All the TV stations, all the radio stations. My mom's family lived in Chicago, so I spent almost more time in Chicago than I did my hometown. And they had a horror host out of Chicago called the Son of Svengoolie. Mm-hmm. He's still around. He's on Me2Me now. He's just called Svengoolie. The reason he was Son of Svengoolie is because there was a previous horror host called Svengoolie. When he quit, Rich Kotz took over and called himself the Son of Svengoolie. He was on before it was the Fox affiliate. It was Channel 32 WFLD TV, and that right there, from when I was a little kid, I'd watch his show, and he would show the Universal monster movies and Hammer horror and the 50s sci-fi stuff like them, and all that great sci-fi. People would consider it garbage now, but I still love it.
I consider absolutely none of it garbage.
The Black Scorpion and all that stuff. So his show is on MeTV every Saturday at 8 p.m. If you guys have MeTV, check it out. He's still throwing rubber chickens and telling bad jokes and showing the same movies. Good time.
Absolutely. I've watched more than a few of the episodes. I think it's available nationwide no matter what. because it's probably the most available horror host show if you discount Joe Bob Briggs' reemergence.
Yeah, I watch him too. And he was another one that came along when I got cable. I watched him on the movie channel before he was on Monster Vision. And, those two guys kind of helped shape my love of horror. But they would also show the same channel about 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays, Night of the Living Dead and these other horror movies that I would discover as a preteen. And I don't know, I was just attracted to that kind of stuff. It was, you don't know. You just, when you're a kid, you just like what you like, and then you talk about it to other people and they look at you like you're weird and you don't understand why they're looking at you like that. Cause you're like, I like it. What do you mean you don't like it? How can you not like it? But,
so if there was a DNA film in there that launched you into fandom, even at that young age, what would it be?
Well, the one that just showed on Spenguli this last Saturday, The Wolfman, with Lon Chaney Jr. I mean, I loved all of the, all the Universal monsters, but my favorite was always The Wolfman. And I think it was just because, it's like the struggle with the id, the beast within, losing control of your temper. And I don't know, it just seemed to resonate with me as a kid. I don't know why. He was, when he was normal, he was popular, but when he had that change, bad things happened. And I don't know, that just resonated with me. I also like Frankenstein. Dracula was cool, but I was never a huge Dracula fan. I mean, I like the movie, but it's not my go-to. I mean, I was more like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Wolfman, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah,
I also had a weird slapstick comedy. I loved the Three Stooges and stuff like that. So I'm like half Three Stooges, half horror. I have this really whacked out sense of humor, but I love the gross stuff. Was Abbott Costello meet Frankenstein was like the perfect marriage of those two worlds. So that's one of my favorites too.
Well, Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man with Vincent Price is the one that I don't think gets discussed nearly enough because it's right there. It's perfect blending of the two as well. I think there's something about that time period when we talk about the 30s and the 40s that built this entire generation of monster fans that, Forey Ackerman called us monster kids. And I really like that term. And the reason I guess Bob Burns had a lot to do with the naming it too, but I just think that there's something that for an entire generation, these movies that were not even contemporary, people think they were more contemporary for us, but they really weren't. These were old movies even by our standards, but they spoke to us. These were as important as like nursery rhymes are to babies to us. I mean, and I, like you, UHF channels, but that's where I discovered most of them. I had a couple choices. I had Chiller Theater out in New York. A little bit later, I had Saturday Night Dead out of Philadelphia with Stella, the man-eater from Manayunk. And, and rarely, but it would happen. Sometimes the Phillies channel at Philly 57 would actually get Goulardi as a rebroadcast out of Chicago. And that's where I discovered, all the catchphrases like "Stay Sick" that the band The Cramps would later pretty much co-opt. So tell me, what about VHS? When did that enter your world?
Actually, a Beta.
Oh, that's awesome.
The first player we had. Yeah, that was early 80s. I think the first movie I rented was Friday the 13th on Beta. It wasn't until years later we got VHS after Beta was pretty much, phased out. Because when that machine broke down, you couldn't go get another Beta, so you might as well just go ahead and, by that time, VHS had won the format wars of those days. Like the HD DVD and the Blu-ray wars of more modern times, which are becoming a thing of the past really quick, unfortunately.
Really quickly. I did a video about all the dead formats, and it's like I still get messages like, I didn't know this existed, I didn't know that existed. It's amazing that there's been always a hunger since like the 50s to try and get movies at home. And it wasn't until the VHS years really that it really worked, which I think is fascinating. And one of the things it did is it pushed horror really into the living room and the mainstream, because now we weren't talking about those 1940s monster films from Universal, and we weren't talking about the 50s giant bug films. Now we were talking about things that could have been released 2 years earlier. And that kind of brings us to Friday 13th.
It's like the drive-in, all the movies that were made for the drive-in suddenly found a new home, the video store shelves. People figured out that for, not a lot of money, you could make a movie that would make a lot of money. And like Halloween was like one of the first ones that really kind of kicked that off. It's very low budget, made a lot of money. Then Friday the 13th, very low budget, made a lot of money. That became, well, we got ourselves a cash cow here. But that was great for us. It was great for me because I didn't care. I loved those movies. I didn't care if they cost $20 to make or $20,000 to make. As long as it was entertaining, that's all I cared about.
And it's fascinating to me because if you look at, say, 1977 Star Wars, right? Big spectacle, big, expensive. And then these little movies are coming out that on a scale are just as successful, but they were made with a budget in mind and an audience in mind.
Well, Star Wars was kind of weird though, because it was like a little low budget movie imitating a big budget movie, because it was made for the time for what he was doing, very shoestring. Now, he didn't get paid to be director. They laughed at him when he said, "Well, I'll just take the franchise rights and the
toy rights,
merch rights." They're just like, merch rights to what? This guy's insane, right? Well, he was a genius as far as being insane. I mean, it's a very thin line between genius and insanity. Apparently, he kind of waffles there a little bit. If you some genius, some not so much. But he made the right call on that one. And then the blockbuster that really started with Jaws was really amped up with Star Wars. But if you can find an original copy of Star Wars, you can see the lines, you can see the strings. You know what I mean? It's not as polished as a modern day $150 million blockbuster.
Yeah, and he went back even when The Empire Strikes Back came back and fixed some of the optical. So he's been tinkering since the very first days.
Yeah, he's like somebody that gets obsessed with plastic surgery and doesn't know when to stop. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a little goes a long way there, buddy, and you went way too far. But I do have an HD copy on my computer of the original Star Wars non-special edition. And
is it the despecialized version, or is it the
despecialized version? There's none of that extra crap, but it's still in HD, and it's really nice to watch that because that's how I like to remember it.
Yeah, I was given a copy of the trilogy in that form, and I'm not a big Star Wars guy. I mean, I've said this a million times. There's 2 films in the series I like, but I would say that it's nice to have something that's so important culturally to something like film that I think is so important to me.
Well, I was like being a few years older than you. I was kind of the original Star Wars kid. 1977, I would have been 9 that year, but I was still 8. To be born in October, you tend to be,
Yeah.
It's like, how old were you when this came out? Well, technically I was 8, but I would have been 9. I hate that shit, but whatever. So I was 8 years old, planted in the seat, and it blew my mind. I was just, I always say that Star Wars was the movie that, just opened up a whole new world to me as far as what was possible with movies. We'd seen the rubber monsters in the 50s, but then when we saw Star Wars on the screen, it's like my first actual theater memory probably would have been the previous year with the remake of King Kong.
Oh, interesting.
I still enjoy that movie, even though a lot of people, tear it down and blow it crap or whatever, but I still found it to be entertaining as a kid, and nostalgia allows me to put on the glasses and still enjoy it. But so between King Kong and Star Wars, that I was ruined after that point, and that's what really made me want to go to the cinemas and enjoy the flicks, and it became more than just something I watched on TV at that point. It became an event, to go to the theater and enjoy a big spectacle.
So I do have a question that leads to in my notes here, but I want to take a break first and talk about your online name of B Movie Mike. So what is a B movie to you? Because I think that there was a time when that meant the same thing for everyone, but today it seems like everyone has their own definition for that.
Well, I think technically the B pictures were back in the studio days when they had the A films and they were putting them in theaters. The theaters were forced to take as a package deal. And if you want this movie, then you have to take these movies with it. And they were like the lower budget, lesser star driven. John Wayne started out in all those Republic westerns that were considered B movies even back in the day. They were non-A-list talent, non-A-list production, unknown directors. It's like where people started out. They were just cheaply made and fodder for cinemas. And then I think it just became notorious with low budget. After a while it'd be like the sci-fi and the horror, and even like Cheech and Chong would have been considered a
Absolutely.
So I think it just means like less than A. You're not going to find Meryl Streep, in a B movie. And there's certain directors that just don't. That's why horror was considered bottom feeding, and there's a lot of actors that still won't admit they were in certain films, and they don't want them on their resume because that's like being on TV back in the day. It's like you were slumming. If you wanted to be a movie star, you couldn't admit that you were in a television show or in a horror movie.
It's a strange world where it was more respectable to be on a daytime soap than the horror movie that you did in the off season.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a working actor, who cares what anybody thinks? I mean, because that's where I come from. It's like you don't like it, I really don't care what you like.
My world will continue spinning just fine, thank you.
Yeah. Do what you like and leave me alone. Whatever.
So theaters. Going to the theater as a young kid was a big experience for me too. I think that for a lot of us of limited means and limited opportunities, it was a really big deal to see a movie in the big screen, and the kind of rapt attention that I had was unbelievable. It was almost sensory overload just to be in a theater even before the movie started.
Well, I've heard you talk about this before, and it's 100% correct. Before VHS, before you had the ability to own a movie, you either saw it in a movie theater or it was on TV. And most of the time you had to wait a year, possibly 2 years, before it would cycle from the theater to the television, because they would keep bringing them back and trying to milk all the money they could. I remember when E.T. ran for like 6 months straight on like 3 screens. I mean, they would just milk them in the theater, and then all of a sudden they would show up like a dead body dumped on the side of the road with all the good stuff cut out of it, for your television broadcast debut. And we weren't rich people, and I got to go to the movie theater maybe, if I was lucky, 10 times a year. And so it was like we're going to the movies was a pretty big damn deal. That'd be like So yeah, it was something you cherished, and you memorized every little thing about the theater, and the smell of the popcorn and the whole night. It was a full-on 4D experience, And back then the theaters were packed with people that reacted to the film, and people could smoke cigarettes in there. You had cigarette smoke wafting up through you could see the beams of the film, and all this stuff. It was just like a magical experience. And now people just watch it on their phone, like it's whatever. So yeah, it's hard for me to relate sometimes to the more modern way of consumption. When I'm looking at it, like they're like, "What do you care? It's just a film, just a movie." Like, well, that used to mean something to me.
So, where's your feelings now? Do you still find yourself, obviously not at the moment, but do you still find yourself preferring the theatrical experience, or have you joined the legions that prefer the home video movement, or where are you at?
Well, luckily I live about 3.5 miles away from a drive-in, and I'm really happy to see the resurgence of the drive-in during this difficult time. We'll leave it at that. I do like going to the movie theaters, but it was starting to just it was starting to get ridiculous with the pricing. You go to like an 8 o'clock show, and by the time just one person, by the time you bought some, you're in $25. Yeah, you're in the price of a Blu-ray just to sit in the seat, and then you got to deal with TV commercials in the movie theater, which never happened. It was always just previews. Maybe it was one of those let's all go to the lobby and get ourselves a treat cartoon or something, but there was never Pepsi commercials or Verizon wireless commercials or whatever they're doing now.
Insurance commercials.
And it's like, am I watching TV or am I watching a movie? It's ridiculous. And then you don't get the audience reaction that you used to get. You're lucky there's maybe 5 people in the theater and they're all staring at their damn phones. They're on Twitter and shit. And you're like, hey, the movie's on. What are you doing? So the theater experience isn't what it used to be. It is still for me, but I don't know. It's lacking. I prefer the drive-in experience. I get to go and sit in my car and I can vape my ass off, and I got control over the volume, and I don't have to pay attention to anybody else's crap, and I'm just watching the movie, and it's a good time. So I do love the drive-in, and I'm of course a physical media person because, like Joe Bob in one of his rants on one of his last shows, where he was talking about, if you get rid of all your physical media and the guy that controls the cloud now controls your movie collection, what are you going to have? And what if they decide to edit everything like they've started doing? And they go on this like, I don't want that. I want to see the movies the way they're intended to be seen, regardless of somebody else's opinion of the content of that movie. I mean, didn't we go through that in the 80s? Now we're going through it again, but it's like got another group. It's like, how many times am I going to have to deal with this censorship crap just because somebody doesn't like something? It's like, I don't care. I like it. Then who are you to tell me what I can like? So I like having the physical media aspect of it. And also what you watch Joe Bob, they lose the rights. The streaming rights aren't forever. So he does the show with his commentary. And when the movie goes off Shudder, which is my favorite streaming platform right now, I'm a huge fan of Shudder. It's great. So I do a combination of going to the drive-in, watching my physical media, and then watching Shudder. But I'd always rather have that copy sitting behind me, knowing that if Shudder loses the rights or this group of people suddenly want to, pull out their torches and start screaming at their stuff, that I'll have a safe copy of it for myself, because I don't care what other people like. I just care what I like. Maybe that's selfish, but
no,
whatever.
It's not selfish. So I'm an all of the above guy too. Been to the drive-in 3 times since the COVID situation started up. That's a little bit more of a drive for me than it is for you, but probably about 40 minutes more of a drive. But and certainly the titles are not necessarily what I would choose to drive that far for. Going to see Raiders of the Lost Ark, a film I've seen I can't tell you how many times. It doesn't make a lot of sense to drive nearly an hour to see it, but I did.
I got it on Blu-ray, and of course I can watch it anytime I want to. But I got to see Raiders of the Lost Ark in a theater when it first released, but I didn't get to see it at a drive-in. So I did get to see like Friday the 13th Part 6 at a drive-in. So that's kind of cool to get the new experience. But really, considering some of the films that were on the docket to be released, I'd kind of rather see. I'm kind of glad to see the old good stuff. Now you got Ghostbusters and The Lost Boys and
Jurassic Park with Jaws as a double feature, which I saw.
Yeah, it's like those are movies that I would rather see compared to some of the things that were on the list to be released. That's just me.
Well, I was very fortunate to see Relic, which is a new horror film out of Australia, at the drive-in. And it's nice to see that a lot of smaller horror films that were not slated for theatrical releases at all are getting an opportunity in all this madness, simply because the drive-ins can license them. Drive-ins work at a thinner profit margin than regular theaters, which is hard to believe, but it's true. They have to be very careful about their double features. They can't overspend, or else it's not even worth opening your doors.
That's what I would say. If you go to a drive-in, eat at their food stand. Don't take your own food. Don't be that guy. No. It's very easy to do, and they're not going to stop you. But they make all of their profit at the concession stand. So, if you go to a drive-in, and no matter how you have to social distance or if they bring it out to your car or whatever, just buy your food there and enjoy the full experience. Because my drive-in's like $6 a head to get in. $6.
Mine's 10, but it's a different part of the country.
If $6 to get in, I mean, I'm going to pay, $15 to go to a movie theater.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I'm still going to save money even if I eat there. So.
Yeah, and the other thing about it is that it allows for an entire generation, because I see a lot of kids at these drive-ins to see these, especially repertory showings. I see in those kids what we got to enjoy.
I remember being a little kid, and they had the swing set up there underneath the screen, and they had all the stuff you could play on, and all the kids at the drive-in would be up there playing, and then as soon as the preview started, you knew you had to get back to your car. And everybody got along, and it was all great. I mean, yeah, there was even though you were in your separate cars, there was still a sense of community. It was really cool.
And I don't think that's gone, because I've had nothing but positive experiences this summer. So I agree with you about Shudder, by the way. I think that Shudder is just doing an incredible job, and we're very spoiled. We forget there was never a service this dedicated to horror that was as curated for fans with some kind of depth. That's really a rare thing we should be celebrating.
Yeah, it's like everything I used to like about Netflix, which I don't have anymore, just personal choice. I'm not going to have 14 different streaming. I've got movies I can watch. But after I discovered Shudder a couple of years ago, it was before Joe Bob even came back, I was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. I mean, it's all of my type of movies in one location. I don't have to search through menus of stuff I don't care about just to try to find something I do like. It kind of reminds me of my first non-cable experience. We had a big giant antenna strapped to the side of the house, and that's how we watched TV back in the day. In Chicago, you had channel 2, 5, 7, 9, and 11. And then on the UHF side, you had the doppelgangers, and then you had like a couple of other ones like 32 and 44. Well, they had a thing called On TV, which changed its name to Spectrum later. So I don't know if there's a correlation between the cable company and this old company, but they would bring out a very small antenna, and they would attach it to your big antenna. And it was like having HBO. But they would have they had like 4 channels or 5 channels on it. There was like the romance channel, the action channel, the comedy channel, and the sci-fi horror channel. And that's where I saw a lot of movies like a lot of the slasher flicks and some of the lesser known movies that would eventually make it to the movie channel. But that was another big introduction to me to the R-rated horror of the 80s. Because it was hard to get to the theater. Like I said, I went to the theater like 10 times a year if I was lucky, and I didn't always get to see what I wanted to see,
No. I remember those days. I remember getting dragged to Annie. I remember it.
Well, living by Chicago, I got to go see Annie at the Erie Crown Theater live. It's like, not only did I get drugged to the movie, I got drugged to the actual friggin' show.
Yikes. I might not have survived that. Even as a kid, I mean, I just wasn't. I was never sentimental as a kid. I mean, I've told the ETA story a million times, but like, I never was the kid who was into kid stuff, like traditional, like childhood stuff. I just never was into.
When I was really young, I did. Well, of course, when you only have like 4 or 5 channels with anything on it, it's that, or you listen to my record collection, which I did most of the time anyway, which is probably where my love of music came from, because if the parents are watching news all the time, there's one TV, what are you going to do? You watch the news, or you can go in your room and do something actually entertaining. So that's what I did.
Close your eyes, spin a record, live in a different world for that 22 minutes.
And I think that's also just like film. That has changed so much, because I remember buying the LP and putting the headphones on and plugging into the stereo, putting the record on, reading the liner notes and staring at the pictures and just being transported into another world. Now music is just background noise, and nobody really, I mean, that's a world most people, I mean, sure, I know vinyl's kind of made a comeback, which is good to see.
Oh, well,
I'm glad to see that, because I think it really makes you focus more on the music.
I spin records every day, and I've never My collection is ridiculous because I've never given up on anything that I actually like. If I own it on vinyl, it's going to be with me forever. Now, if I don't like something, it might go away. We've all had those records.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
But yeah, no, I think there's something about the tactile existence that we had as kids that in today's digital age has gotten lost. Now, that's not saying they don't have something about their experience that we don't have.
Right, they're just experiencing it in a different way.
Right. I just don't have any way to access that in a way that I can process it. You know, to me, holding the record while you listen to it in your room, reading the liner notes about 1 million times. That's how I learned the words to songs. It wasn't even you know, you read along.
Well, like I loved Pink Floyd, The Wall, and that would be one I would just you put on the headphones and you're transported into this. It's like a movie inside your head. The lyrics perfectly tell you what's going on. The music is the mood. So when I saw the movie The Wall, of course it was going to pale in comparison to the one that was in my head from listening to it, but it was kind of neat to see them attempt to bring it to life. But now I think music is more of just kind of like a soundtrack to life. It's kind of a background, not quite like elevator music, but kind of more. They want it there, but it's more like, I don't know, white noise just to kind of keep them company or something. It's not, I don't think it's like how we experienced it. It was a world we dove into. It was like watching a movie with your eyes closed that was in your mind. It was just that the music was creating. Yeah,
and the rarity of it, because I didn't have a record store anywhere inside a distance I could get to. So it was mostly department stores or mail order. So when I decided I needed all the Alice Cooper records, or if I needed all the Black Sabbath records, Ozzy, then it was a slow process. You really treasured every one you got your hands on. It wasn't as easy as today.
Yeah, and you know, you didn't. I think like Kiss was able to, whether you think they're garbage or not, from '74 to '78. You know, they were like Marvel superheroes that played rock and roll, you know, but you didn't know anything about them because they were able to maintain this mystique.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that anymore. With social media, everybody knows what you had for breakfast, you know, every day. And you can't really create that fantasy world around yourself anymore like the bands could back in the day. And I think that's missing too. And there's just so many with digital streaming. And there's just so much more than what there used to be. I think we, just like with movies, you only got to see a movie and then wait 2 years to see it on TV. You kind of memorized every frame because you knew that was going to be the only time you got to see it in that way. Well, it's kind of the same thing with when your favorite band put out a record. You memorized every note and every lyric, and because you knew it was going to be a while before they put out another one. Or that you could get to the record store to buy another one. Because, you know, my parents were like, what do you mean you want another record? You just got one. What do you need another record for? You know, it's like, no, it's nice to have more than one.
And heaven forbid you discover a band that had a catalog. That was a long process, you know?
That was me with AC/DC. I mean, even though Back in Black is still probably one of my favorite records of all time and had a big impact on me, I'm more of a Bon Scott guy. And when I discovered AC/DC, I you know, every time I went to a record store, I would look for one I didn't have. And I eventually was able to get, I even had the Australian like import of Dirty Deeds. And I was like a fanatic about AC/DC and had to get all the records. And I don't know, man. I don't think it's just so much. You just pull up Spotify and you go, oh, I didn't know they had this other song.
Exactly.
It's like same, you know?
Well, to give you a direct example, a member of this community reached out to me. They know my byline in my books, it reads something like, I grew up on a diet of yellow spine paperbacks, black and white monster movies, and the Thunder Lizard backbeat of rock and roll. So everyone kind of knows those are the three things that I'm all about. So he suggested, he's like, have you heard about this band, The Warning? It's three teenage girls from Mexico. You need to hear them. And here's the thing. I do love it. I checked it out. But I literally had a song playing within 3 minutes of him saying, you should check this band out. And while it's awesome that I had that kind of access, will they ultimately become one of those bands that sticks with me for 25 years, like all those bands that I had to struggle just to get their catalog? I don't know. Maybe. You never know. But there is something to be said about rarity and exclusivity.
Well, it's kind of like the rich kid that gets everything they want. Do they really respect it? Versus the poor kid that had to work for everything, and he treasures everything he has because he had to kill himself to get it. But the rich kid, just like everything's disposable. So it could almost be like, just like, oh, what was that band? Type it in. Oh, yeah, that's pretty good. But did you feel like you earned the right to listen to that, or it's just like it was just microwave? Oh, it was ready.
And mind you, they're really, really good. I've been playing them pretty much nonstop for the last week and a half or 2 weeks, whatever it is, since Lance suggested. But I wish we were still in the day, whereas it took me a week to find a record store at least that had it. I just think there's something healthier about wanting something.
But again, though, I have to agree with you. It's awesome that you can do that. Because being an old guy, I really don't have the tenacity that I used to have for, going after this stuff. It's kind of nice to be able to be lazy and pull out your phone and go, oh yeah, that's cool. I love technology. I mean, I also grew up being a fan of Star Trek, and so my kid always tells me I'm the weirdest dad on the planet because I help him with computer issues. He doesn't help me. He's like, you're not supposed to be that smart about this stuff, Dad. I'm the one that's supposed to help you. Like, well, my brain has always been really interested in what's next. So.
Yeah, my mom comes over every week to get help with her digital coupons before she goes grocery shopping. So I'm still in the more traditional role.
Yeah, but it's great.
So getting back to film for just a moment, although I could talk music with you forever, maybe we'll make that a different show at some point. What's the last great new film that you've seen? Anything you want to try to champion?
Oh man, well. Really, I worked so many hours last year. I only got to go to the theater like maybe 3 times. I saw Crawl, which I wouldn't say is an amazing classic, but I enjoyed it. It's good for what it is. I enjoyed the father-daughter story. I thought it was pretty strong. It had a narrative. Although I live in Florida, so it's not really how hurricanes work, but close enough,
It's not really how alligators work either.
Not really. No, they're not that aggressive. But they did kind of set that they are aggressive if you're next to the nest, and they did put a nest by the house, which would technically kind of make them a little more aggressive than they normally are. But
they might not have gone after those looters, though.
No. I mean, they are night hunters, and they do hunt in the water more than on land. I mean, they stretched it a bit, but still, good performances, decent story. I enjoyed it. Blackbird. I enjoyed it. Not a classic. Evil Superman. I thought it shocked me in a good way with how far it went. I was not expecting some of the gore. Pleasantly surprised. I was like, oh, it went there. That's pretty cool. Ultimately, though, I thought the beginning was weak and the parents were wasted. The father character was good, but mother character, it had some writing issues and overall kind of unsatisfactory in that way, but I did enjoy it for what it was. But Joker, I guess, is the next one I saw. And it had a lot of hype. And I'm always on my guard whenever I'm going into something that's like, when everybody says this is the greatest thing that's ever been made, I naturally have my guard up when I go in. So I was kind of pessimistic through this started to look like it was going to be this fancy schmancy art house, look how arty I am, annoying movie. But then it turned, and I thought it was brilliant. So it won me over. So I guess that would have to be my answer, just out of lack of seeing a bunch of other stuff. I would have to say Joker. Kind of a long way to get to it, but thought I'd set it up a little bit.
No, I appreciate that. I will say, Mike, if you get the chance, there's a Thai film called The Pool. That is the other crocodilian film that came out last year about a young assistant director on a film shoot who gets stuck in a empty concrete swimming pool with no way out, with an escaped Asian crocodile. and it's kind of what I wanted Crawl to be, because it's a lot more ruthless, and it has real heart to it, though. You care about the characters. There's not many characters at all because given the setup. But I thought it was really an intense film. And although it wasn't one of my favorites of the year necessarily, I think it was like 7th or 8th. It's really solid. So if you want a good crocodilian terror film, check it out at some point. So one conversation we tend to have a lot in this channel, and I think on all horror channels, for better or worse, is about the big franchises. And everyone knows my stance of I just want them all to end so we can get new franchises to replace them. But that aside, what do the big franchises, what have they meant to you, and what do they mean to you now?
Well, if you want to talk about Star Wars, I'm kind of like you in so much that I like 2.5 movies. I like the original. I think Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars movie that will ever be made. And I like the first half of Return of the Jedi. Once you get to the teddy bears, I'm out. It becomes a toy commercial and garbage. And I hate it. Even when I was 15, when I saw the movie, I hated that part of it. It was like, I just walked out of my least favorite Star Wars movie. And then it got worse. I didn't know. I had no idea what was coming. The prequels,
yeah, they're unwatchable.
They're just as unwatchable as this new garbage that they call Star Wars. It's all garbage. I mean, somebody's like, well, I suppose you're going to say that the prequels are better now. No, a turd is a turd.
No,
you set one turd next to another turd, it doesn't make that turd better. They're both turds.
Our point of separation here might be that I do the two that I like. Empire Strikes Back is my favorite of the bunch, but I do like Rogue One. I'm not looking for a debate about it, but it's just I like how that film didn't need to be a Star Wars movie. It could have just been a world.
How it was entirely explained in the crawl of the original and was completely unnecessary. And then they took the fact that there was a design flaw purposely put in the Death Star so that Luke didn't even need the Force in the first movie anyway. He was the only pilot that could hit that hole because he had the Force. Don't use the targeting computer, Luke. Use the Force.
No,
well, he didn't need the Force because obviously that design was put there on purpose.
That's the thing. I completely agree with you. I just don't have the reverence for the original film that you do. I recognize that it's superior to it's superior to anything that can. But I think Empire is a better film by far.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Return of the Jedi, I've always had issues with all over the place. I hate the fact it's not so much the teddy bears. The teddy bears are annoying, but I hate that they just repeat the first film. Oh, another Death Star, another place you have to shoot it. I mean, I just can't believe it's lazy.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's kind of lazy, but I did like how Luke was given an arc. You know, he started out in the first film as a whiny farm boy, teenager, annoying as hell. Then through Empire Strikes Back, getting his ass whooped and learning what it took to become a Jedi and a man. By the time we get to the third film, he is fully realized as a character.
Yeah, he's Johnny
Although
Cash
the writing isn't always as solid as it could be in that regard, it did kind of give him an arc. It took 3 pictures for him to earn his Jedi Knight status. He wasn't just automatically all-powerful without need of an explanation in the first film. Big problem I had with the new series. It was just like, oh, this person knows everything and they're the best Jedi in the world, but we don't need to know why. It's just because. There was no earning of the power. He went through 3 films of getting his ass whooped by various characters to become the Jedi Knight that he became, for better or worse. You know, the Jedi has a lot of problems. I can't defend it, but
I will say that I think Jedi is probably the best. Ironically, after the Jabba sequence, which I think everyone loves, and I think is probably a fan favorite for the whole franchise, it actually is a better shot film than the first 2, which is frustrating because they so much talent went into the least amount of like actual value. To me, I don't know. Maybe I'm out of my mind. I just think that I think Jedi, especially the throne room battle scene at the end, is stunning to look at.
It has its moments. It really does. But it also a little fan service here and there, and a little this, a little that. It was a very unbalanced movie. It was like Empire knew what it was, And that's what it was. And it was like it started and it ended before you even really knew you watched a 2-hour movie. It was just like, that's it? There's no more? You know, you wanted them to keep going because it was that good. I didn't get that feeling from Jedi, though. It's just kind of like, it I don't know. It was just kind of up and down. It was good. It was like, it was good. It was bad. It was supposed to be the Chewbacca's home planet, not a planet of teddy bears, you know? And if they had given us that, you know, maybe that might have brought the balance back.
Oh, it would have helped. It definitely would have helped. I just think that a second Death Star is the biggest problem I have. It's just.
And then what's it? In they brought back another Death Star. Only this time it was a Death Planet.
Exactly.
We
don't need doomsday weapons in every Star Wars film.
No, we don't. So the first two movies are my favorite. The second being the best. And then I can watch Jedi, but I have to be in the mood.
Will you at least give me that Rogue One conceptual issues aside? It's probably the best of the new Star Wars of the Disney era.
I hate the Grand Moff Tarkin CGI crap fest and the Princess Leia. It was like a story on rails. It was just like the story. Everything you needed to know about that movie was in the crawl of the first one. It's like, and then how they retro engineered the need for the film in the first place, and then they brought the characters together, and then I guess I can see it, but there's a lot about it that I just
I just felt it was a great World War II spy movie in its own right.
It was a better war movie than the Star Wars movie.
Well, yeah, and you got to understand that's probably where I would prefer it to have been. So it's all depending on what you love, you know.
But it's like, first they're trying to talk. They send this guy to get her because they're trying to talk her into joining the side. And then when she's all gung ho about doing it, then all of a sudden they're against her and they don't want to do it. It's like they spend the first part of the movie looking for her, and they find her with that guy and whatever they find her, and then they bring her back and try to convince her to lead the thing, to do the thing, and then all of a sudden she's on board to do the thing, and they don't want to do the thing anymore. So she goes off with her buddies on an to do the thing that they don't want them to do, but they want her to do at the beginning of it. It's like, what the hell? The story is just completely bad shit, man. It's unnecessary. Ugh.
But really, I mean, with big franchises,
it's okay if you like it, though.
No, cool. Believe me, man. You don't even have to say that. But for the big franchises like Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw, these long-running franchises in the horror genre just continue and continue and continue. I'm not asking you about necessarily whether you think they should continue or not, because I think it takes kind of a form of insanity to say yes to that. But how did you experience these franchises, and what did it mean to you? Was it always a positive thing, or were you skeptical about it from the beginning? Or
well, in the beginning, it was cool. I mean, hey, they're releasing another movie. You know, I like the slasher genre. It's like my favorite subgenre of horror. Besides, I like sci-fi horror and whatever, and creature features and the whole 9 yards. But I like slashers, and I liked. I didn't get to see Texas Chainsaw. I came out in '74. I was only about 6, so I was a little young for that one. But I did catch that one on beta later on in the '80s. I remember the Halloween ads on TV. This 1978, so I was almost 10. It came out right after I turned 10, and it just captured my imagination. The music, the mood, the lighting. Something just drew me to that TV ad. It made me like, what is it about this movie that I have to see this? I didn't understand. I was 10, right? But then the next year, a friend of mine was staying over, and he's like, oh, you got to watch this zombie movie, man. This is great. This thing called Night of the Living Dead. So it was late night TV. We're watching that. And that blew my mind. I was just like, at the time, I hadn't really attached. I liked it all. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, it's a horror movie. Cool, let's watch it. But then I saw previews for Alien, the original Alien, and then that blew my mind because it was very minimalistic. It kind of pulled you in and made you want to, hey, what is this thing? Well, lucky for me, my dad was a sci-fi fan, so he actually took me to see Alien before I was even 11. I think I was still 10. That movie blew my mind, man. that was like my first real R-rated theater horror movie, and that still sticks with me. So Alien is a very, just as much a part of me as Halloween or Friday the 13th. And I know we disagree on the sequel to Alien, but that's okay.
We won't
like
go
it.
there.
We
We won't
won't
go there.
We won't go there.
Want to talk politics and religion next?
No. Aliens, politics, and religion, those are the things we don't talk about.
Yeah. Maybe add a fifth part to a certain franchise to that, and we're good.
Yeah. But I loved Halloween 2. Because that was the first Halloween I actually got to see, was Halloween 2.
Can we stop on Halloween 2 for a second? Because I want to sing some praises as well. I mean,
I love that movie.
Why do people not get that was a nearly perfect follow-up? I mean, nothing was going to be Halloween,
No.
the original, but it still has not been surpassed for being tense, for being scary, to building on the mythology in a healthy, creative way. I think it's one of the best sequels ever made.
It never bothered me that they came up with the whole sibling thing. I mean, I realized they had to come up with something to tie it together to make it make sense, and that made about as good a sense as anything else. I mean, I don't understand people's problem with that. Okay, so maybe it's a little more 80s as far as the gels that they used and the synthesizers instead of the start piano. But isn't a sequel supposed to be the original plus more? And I always kind of felt like Halloween 2 gave you that little bit more, but at the same time was almost a perfect continuation, because you're not going to get, sure, Halloween 2 is not as good as the original, but you're not going to get anything better. You know what I mean? It's like that's about as good as you're going to get with a sequel without being better than the original, which I think is impossible. It's the original. It is
Listen,
what it is. I mean, if you don't like it, you think it's boring, well, that's one thing. That's your thing, and that's fine. But to me, as somebody who this movie means a lot to, and I come at it from that perspective. I realize that there's a whole new modern audience that wants maybe something different from their Halloweens. And I think they're getting it. And they're welcome to it. But I prefer that for me.
Yeah, so I like the fact that the film is stylized. In the chat, DJ Donnelly mentions, he asks, why is the hospital so empty in Halloween 2? What I would just say to that is that, you know, the same reason we don't have, like, every 5 minutes someone hitting the doorbell outside of the house Laurie's babysitting in the original. You have to choose to frame your story. They decided to go with a very spooky setting. Is it realistic? No.
Well, having grown up in a smaller area and being in a hospital when I was younger, I had my tonsils out when I was about 10 years old. Having to go to the bathroom with the IV thing in your arm, they weren't
been there.
They weren't like where I was at in a small town like Haddonfield, Illinois, where it's supposed to be. There wouldn't have been 40,000 people in the hallway in the middle of the night, because all the patients that were there were usually asleep. So they would dim the lights in the hallway because everybody was asleep. And the third shift nurses were just always hanging out at the station. And unless you hit your little ticker thingy to light your light up to let them know that you needed something, they would come in and, you know, check you out and see if you're okay. And maybe if you need medicine, they give it to you. But it was a nighttime atmosphere. I don't know why people seem to think that it has to be ER.
Well, I think that had they just put a few inserts of a few patients sleeping or maybe one milling around, this issue would go away. But it's not in the film.
They weren't part of the story, though. So I mean, maybe they require it, but I didn't.
No, and I don't require it either. I just feel like you need to have slasher films only work with a sense of isolation.
Yeah,
that's very, very true. So showing a bunch of extraneous characters would have defeated that sense of isolation. So listen, you can say you'd do something different, but if you wanted the next chapter of Laurie Strode, you need it. And by the way, there is a Halloween film coming out next year that's mostly Laurie lying in a hospital bed too. So make your decisions accordingly.
What you said, you know, I guess I know what to expect.
Yep. Just know what you're going to get. So Halloween, obviously, then the original was really an important film for you. It was an important film for me as well. What about the other big franchises?
I loved the original Friday the 13th. It was the first, I think it was maybe part 3. I know part 3 was the first one I saw in theaters. So that one, although it's not the best, I do have a love for part 3, as hokey as it is. The first 4 Fridays are, to me, great, varying degrees. I think part 2 is a very smart sequel as far as how they decided to try to follow it up. I love the atmosphere. They tried to keep the same feel. We've discussed that on the factory with Peter, and he seemed to agree with that sentiment that Friday 2 had a lot of what made Friday 1 good. It seemed like a good continuation. 3 was, because of the 3D, was kind of uneven, but it was still Richard Brooker's one of my favorite Jasons. Love the look, the hockey mask, the whole 9 thing, and then Friday 4, the final chapter, was a good way for it to go out, and it wouldn't have bothered me if had that been the last one. I got to see it in the theater. It was back still when people had fun. All my friends were there. It was high school. It was just like people yelling and screaming and throwing popcorn. It was a great time. I know you're not real hip to A New Beginning, and at first neither was I. That was like Halloween 3. I first saw that in the theater, and I was like, I've warmed to it. Of course, I really appreciate Halloween 3 for what it is now. I mean, it's a good side story, and I really like it. I don't hate it. Like Friday 5's, it's more of a comedy to me. It's the slapstick pseudo Jason shot by a porn director comedy type movie, but it's not like, it's very far separated from the original 4. 6 I thought was kind of neat because he was going for a Universal horror Frankenstein Jason type thing. That worked. Yep. The rest of them I could really do without. So although Friday 13th I think has the best amount, the most amount of good sequels.
Yeah.
Because the Halloween really
does not.
I can watch 4, 5, and 6 for shits and giggles, but I can't call them good movies, right? I could say I enjoy them for being what they are, but they're not good, right?
They're a big step down.
And H2O is of its time. It's Scream-a-ween. It's the 90s.
I think
if
with
you
a little
enjoy
more distance,
like if you're younger than I am and you came up in the 90s and that was kind of like what Scream was, what you grew up with, then you're probably going to love it because it's of that. It's like grunge music, I mean, if you were 18 years old in 1992 or something and that was what you kind of came into, well, I was like 24 in 1992, so my stuff is all, my decade is like, I don't figure decades to be on the zeros. I kind of figure there's bleed over.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
74 to 84 is kind of like my decade. It's like all the movies, I'm more of a 70s horror guy than an 80s guy because after 84 it got really cartoonish and silly. Same with the music. I mean, I love the original glam metal of the Sunset Strip, but after 85 it just got to be a parody of itself. It was just like garbage.
Well, don't you think after Appetite for Destruction, there was just nowhere for anyone to go?
Yeah, I mean, Appetite was great because it was kind of like, it was almost the middle finger to that stuff. It was kind of like, take off your girly clothes and let's rock. What the hell's going on here? We've had enough.
It was healthy. It was a healthy dose of punk rock attitude in commercial metal.
Blues rock, metal.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. But it's a brilliant record that I think should go down as one of the top rock records of all time. It may be for that period, and again, I'm using your cutoff there of about 84, 85, whatever you want to do. For that period, it might be my only album I'd say is a stone cold classic of that quote unquote hair metal period. And yes, everyone can hate on me for using that term, but I think it's just head and shoulders way above everything else being produced. And I'm not a Guns N' Roses fan. I don't think they produced another good record after that. But that record is phenomenal.
If you took the Use Your Illusions records, you could get maybe one good record out of those two. And I was a huge Guns N' Roses fan. But I'm saying, I mean, you take the two Illusions records, there's a lot of filler. There's a lot of bloat. You could get maybe one good CD out of those two. But I enjoyed it.
I was running.
It's like, you know.
I was running record stores when those two records came out, and it was a weird time because people didn't buy them, generally speaking, at the same time. Both records, they bought one, then maybe 2 weeks later they bought another, and it wasn't always the order you'd expect either. So it was a very weird thing. I think it was partially just the time had changed, music had changed, and some of the passion had been siphoned out. But if they were to know that the next thing out was going to be the Spaghetti Incident, they might have bought both of them at the same time, right?
Yeah. Although Spaghetti Incident had a couple of cool Down on the Farm by the UK Subs. A couple of cool punk songs on that record, you know.
And the bonus track, the unlisted bonus track, is a cover of Charles Manson.
Yeah. What's Your Game Girl or something like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
By the way, Charles Manson was a horrid musician, but I own the record.
Well, he was just a horrid person, but yeah.
Well, pretty much. but listen, hung out with the Beach Boys, so there you go. The Beach Boys actually recorded one of his songs, heavily rewritten. Scary.
He tried to be a hanger-on with everybody, but everybody kind of recognized him as being crazy. He was kind of like the guy you give a candy bar to because you don't really want to piss him off, but you don't want him around you. It's like, okay, Charlie, here's a candy bar, whatever, man. I'll see you later. Just don't kill me. You know?
Well, he had access to all the women. So I mean that's
well, he was a Svengali. He would find homeless people and kids that have been kicked out or on drugs, and he built his own little family out of these people that had no self-identity or self-esteem, and became their leader because he was a manipulative piece of shit.
Yeah, pretty much.
He was older than most of those people too. I mean, he was not a hippie. He was in his 30s.
Oh yeah, no,
he was a decade older than the people that he had manipulated into doing his evil deeds, you know.
Oh yeah, no, he talks about there's an autobiography, which I use that term loosely, even though it's on the cover of the book, that's written by Noel Edmonds. It's really mostly transcriptions of interviews, but it's framed as an autobiography. And he's like, I was into Sinatra and Como. I could give a crap about most of the Summer of Love bands. He didn't care, but it gave him the women gave him the power over men, and the drugs, dealing with the biker gangs. It was a powder keg. That whole lifestyle was a powder keg. The only thing positive I think that came out of the whole Manson experience, and I mean this, is that it contextualized the hippie movement in a way that I think it needed to be, where people started to see that there was an unhealthy side of just kind of that blanket rebellion without any real thought behind it. And the next time we have that kind of rebellion with the punk revolution, there was at least some motivation behind it, beyond like, let's get high and go, whatever.
Yeah, I was way more into the punk thing, but by the time I came up, the hippie was not. That was not well regarded. That whole era was, hippies were not looked up to; they were looked down on. So
oh yeah,
and it came up from that aspect of it. You mentioned the Cramps. I've seen the Cramps live; they're great. Lucas Interior unfortunately passed away a few years ago. Poison Ivy, great guitar player. I mean, they were a nice team. They really Bad Music for Bad People, I think, was probably the first Cramps record everybody gets, right? I mean, maybe that's like your most well known.
Yeah, I think fans tend to look at Stay Sick as probably the pinnacle for them, because I think by the time you get the Flame Job, something was already kind of off at that point. Not saying that there aren't great tracks, but I think.
Can Your Pussy Do the Dog? Was that on there?
No, that was on Can Your Pussy Do the Dog was, I think, on. It wasn't on Bad Music for Bad People. I think it was on the album before that, Smell of Female.
That sounds about right.
I
Bikini
think
Girls with Machine Guns. That might have been a Flame Job.
That's on Stay Sick.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've listened to this stuff. I know I saw them on the Flame Job tour.
I saw them. Yeah, I saw them on both those tours of those two records, because that was the point where it's Enigma. They were on Enigma Records, and then they turned over and were they had been on A&M, which was a big deal because that was distributed through Polydor and Polygram Records. And then they went to Enigma for Stay Sick and Flame Job, which gave them complete creative control over whatever they wanted to do, but they had like a third of the audience.
Yeah.
But I agree about Poison Ivy, though. She was a very basic guitar player in many ways, but she was always on.
Well, I love, love 50s rock as well as 50s movies. The original rock and roll is where that started for me, and I thought punk rock kind of took from that, just sped it up and added more attitude. But the Ramones were basically just a 50s pop band.
Oh, yeah.
With Marshall stacks and, a higher BPM.
Well, a song like I Want to Be Your Boyfriend should have been the first hint.
Yeah. But, I love that stuff, and what attracted me to the Cramps was just they were crazy. Lux Interior with his, the suits he would wear, and he would deep throat microphones on the stage and just act all crazy. They were just a spectacle, and I didn't follow them for long, but I did have a band and we covered a couple of their songs like, I can't remember what's that? Can't remember half the names anymore. I'm getting old. This is like, you're talking about 30 years ago, so.
So to backtrack off the Cramps, because again, I think you and I have to commit that at some point. We need to do just a music episode together, because I think there's something there. But I want to go back to Halloween because we talked now infamously on the show that was at that point called The Sausage Factory. There was an episode where we reviewed Halloween 2018 as a group, and you and I were the lone birds out there screaming that we did not enjoy the film. I'm not going to ask. I don't want to relitigate that. But what I want to do is, given what we know that film was, what would it take for that series to get on the right path for you? What would they have to do to fix it?
Oh man. Well, I guess a minor couple of patches they could have done that would have made it more interesting to me would have been, I like the relationship between Laurie and her granddaughter. I think maybe her daughter being so traumatized from being taken away from her mother and raised in foster care, and maybe that she was, browbeaten by psychiatrists into thinking that her mom was 100% crazy, but her granddaughter sneaking over to spend time with grandma and go to the shooting range. You know what I mean? Kind of have a little bit more. I was kind of hoping that one scene where they see the gun on the wall, that, it was going to be the granddaughter that grabs the gun. She'd been sneaking over to get some target practice in with grandma. Maybe there was she'd been going behind her mom's back to spend some quality time with Laurie, and she could have been like the next generation or something. That I would have liked to seen that relationship explored more than just Laurie being the crazy lady and then her daughter faking that she was scared and then shooting.
Yeah, that scene makes zero sense.
It would have made more sense to me if the granddaughter would have said, "I got this, Ma," or something, or just grabbed the gun before her mom even knew what was going on, because she's completely shell-shocked, and just the granddaughter shoots. That would have made more sense to me. The boyfriend, he didn't. I don't know. The doctor. I think we kind of talked about Dr. Satan or Sartain. Like I told you, I think in the pre-show, I don't think this went out on the air, but when he jumped up over the car with the Michael Myers mask on, I was out. I wanted to walk out, but the person I was with stopped me, wouldn't let me go. They thought it was too funny. My kid likes to laugh at me when I'm being tortured. So he was enjoying my reaction to the rest of the film. If you're going to replace the sibling thing, like I said in part 2, that didn't bother me, come up with something better. They didn't. It was just a couple lines of dialogue. Oh, that was just a rumor, and then that was it. But
maybe something.
They still have to make Michael Myers and Laurie get together somehow, or do they?
I just think the Laurie character
for me that Michael was just caught that night and then stuck back in the asylum, and then he was there till he was 60 and didn't do anything. He patiently waited for 15 years in the first film, and then he broke out to do something, and they stick him right back in, and now he patiently waits for another, what, 40? It's like, what? That whole part didn't make sense to me. And the bloggers with the mask. I have so many problems with the tonality of that movie. We're going to completely get rid of all the other sequels, but here's the gas station from part 4. Here's the scene from part 2 that we erased and replaced.
Here's the bathroom scene from H2O.
5. And what are you doing? I thought you were going to give me a whole new narrative that was supposed to be better than what already existed. Not have the best part of your movie be pieces and parts of movies that no longer exist. I think the whole thing was flawed to begin with. The entire idea of what they wanted to do was not well thought out. It's a patchwork quilt of bad ideas. The script was horrible, but cinematography was good, music was good. I think they sold us a bill of goods telling us the original Michael Myers was coming back, but he's in one scene.
From a distance, so we can't
From
tell.
A distance in a mirror. The new guy did a good job, don't get me wrong, but you told me it was going to be OG.
Oh, sure.
Well,
listen, they also pretended that John Carpenter was going to have major say in that film, and that didn't happen.
Well, from what I understand, he did stop them from doing 2 stupid things. One, they were going to turn Laurie into a villain type character by having her be the reason Michael Myers escaped from the bus.
Well, that wasn't so much him. That was test audiences, because that's shot. All that exists somewhere.
So they, like when, how stupid is it? They turned her into him at the end of the movie, and she's stalking him from inside the house and comes out of the shadow. Like it was just, but they were going to reshoot the ending.
Yeah.
Where Laurie shoots him instead of Dr. Loomis. And then they were going to show the cop that was in the movie be the one that arrests him and takes him in, which is why that guy has issues, because he was the one that arrested Michael Myers at the scene.
Well, besides Laurie,
I guess Michael's motivation for hunting Laurie would be the fact that she was the one that shot him and the reason why he got caught, not because of the sister thing.
Yeah. So besides Laurie shooting him, all that now is in the sequel. So, well, don't worry, it hasn't been abandoned. They're going ahead anyway.
They seem to be pretty proud of bad ideas. So, hey, whatever.
Listen, they made a lot of money off of bad ideas. So,
I love it when somebody uses that as a defense. Like bad pop music, right? Well, it makes a lot of money. Doesn't mean it's good.
No.
It just means it made a lot of money. It just means you have a lot of lemmings that want to be a part of a crowd, so they go spend money on something that they don't like, but they don't want to say they don't like it because it's the hip thing to like. It's not really necessarily means it's quality.
Listen, Crank makes a lot of money, but it's no good for your teeth either.
Yeah.
So there you go.
There you go.
But so do you think it's irredeemable at this point, or do you think it should be just mothballed for 10 years and see if some genius comes out of the woodwork, or what do you think?
I already sound like old man screaming at the sky, but I think it's unnecessary. It's like Resurrection is, it's not a good film, but I think it had better ideas. It's a little more ahead of its time with the whole online live stream event inside the Michael Myers home. That have handled better with better characters. It's at least something that's like, hey, well, that's actually kind of forward thinking and somewhat interesting. I had seen none of that in 2018, and I don't think there's going to be any more. And like Busta Rhymes, I know that was kind of the thing, though. You had LL Cool J, and that was just the 90s. Okay, it's just what happened. So yeah, it's a bad film, but at least it's entertaining. For me, it's so bad it's good. I can enjoy it. It doesn't piss me off as much as it does other people, because I know it's a bad film. But it wasn't like H2O was the grand standard that it was giving a sequel to, or Halloween 6, or Halloween 5, or Halloween 4. I had kind of gotten used to bad sequels by that point. And when you talk
of callous,
something new that's better than the original, better than part 2. The best Halloween movie that's been made since 1978. And then you hand me that piece of garbage. I don't know how you don't expect me to be disappointed. It's none of the things they said it was going to be. It's just another bad sequel.
So the one thing about it is, like,
I mean, it's not like Rob Zombie bad, but although Rob Zombie's films did have a personality of their own, good or bad, I mean, they're different. Not necessarily the good way. I mean, I don't really enjoy, they're an assault on my senses, and I don't really enjoy watching them. But at least he had kind of, I don't know, balls to do what he was going to do. I don't know.
Halloween 2018 was interesting because it was marketed as a very mainstream film, like very mainstream, like Jamie Lee Curtis going on the morning shows to promote it. Do you think that horror should be that respectable, or do you think that it loses something when we kind of market to the mainstream? Is that,
if we learned anything from hair metal, no, it shouldn't be. It's always best when it's underground, because whenever it becomes cotton candy and commercialized, it just becomes a shadow of its former self. It's fake, right? You're not getting the real deal. You're getting fake. You know what I mean? It looks like it, but upon further inspection, it's like it's a very bad imitation. It's not the real deal. That's kind of how I feel about whenever anything gets overtly commercialized, because then the studios, and I guess you can blame some of the fans too, but I don't know, it's like video games. I mean, the Wii. Look how many units the Wii sold. But then it was a flash in the pan. It was like the hip thing at the time. It didn't sustain, because whenever you go for that audience, they're not the ones that are going to be loyal. They're going to move on to the next thing. So if you design your horror to be like pop music, to be popular and hip, it's going to have a expiration date on it, and it's not going to smell good after a couple of years. I kind of feel that way about H2O. I kind of feel like it's of its time, whereas the original was timeless. I mean, because it was just a cheap movie based on babysitter murders, and it was just. But back then, you wanted to make the best film you could possibly make because you wanted to make another film. So even though you were given a garbage story, you did the best you could with it. And I think you end up with better product, better films when you're on that level of filmmaking more than you do than making the next cartoon installment of Star Wars or the. Now we've talked about, I guess we kind of got to talk about this, the certain social elements of modern film. I'll be kind. I'm not trying to insult anybody. I mean, from the factory, I've been told I'm alt-right, but I'm not. But whatever, I just call it like I see it. Politics and social politics have been a part of film since the beginning of film. And like I told you, if you come at it in a reefer madness kind of way, I'm going to look at you like you're stupid and I'm going to laugh at you. But the danger part of that is that in the day, reefer madness actually scared people. If you could watch that ridiculous crap turd of a movie, you'll piss yourself laughing because it's so ridiculous. But in its era, people actually believed it. And that's how cannabis really got to be, it was legal up till 1937. Mm-hmm. Our country's 244 years old. Cannabis has only been illegal since 1937. All because of propaganda, and so it's dangerous to me whenever, but I hope people can see the difference. And if you have a good narrative and you make me think about a subject in a way that I've never thought about it before, I may still not agree with you, but I'll be happy that you challenged my way of thinking. And I'll walk away a fan. Like, even though I disagree, that was a great ass movie, and I really appreciate making me look at something in a different way. But if you're just going to preach at me And then before the movie comes out, tell me I'm a piece of shit if I don't like it. Then I'm going to have a problem with it. And I'm not going to be afraid to say it. Oh, if you don't like this movie, you hate women, or you hate gay people, or you or this, or you or that. Well, obviously you're just telling me that your movie sucks, you know it sucks, and you're trying to shame me into not saying it sucks.
I think when we tend to see the social messages presented poorly because of bad writing,
Yeah.
that's when we raise our hackles. And unfortunately, there's people who want to turn the conversation into a social situation that is far much more involved than any little horror film could ever really confront anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I think that I'm extremely socially liberal, and I get annoyed whenever someone is preaching at me about whatever subject and doing it in such a way that's so obvious and terse and boring. I think when it distracts from a good story, it's a problem. When it informs the story and makes things more real for you, then it's a good thing. I just think it's bad writing that's the real problem.
And that was the main problem with the Star Wars films and Halloween 2018. Really is the writing. You pointed out when we talked about Halloween 2018, and I've even seen female movie reviewers on YouTube talk about the Star Wars and the Halloween and how you don't write strong female characters by making all the male characters weak and stupid.
Weak, stupid, or evil.
Yeah, you don't. That's not how you write a strong character.
No.
They have to earn their strength, right? And they have to be amongst other strong characters. They can't. It's like if you make all the women, like they used to be in some movies. I agree that sometimes female characters were poorly written in the past, but you don't write that wrong by going wrong in the other direction. It's just as wrong.
Maybe even more so because
tables and you've solved no problem.
It might even be more wrong because now you know that there's a problem and you have a chance to address it, and instead you're just doubling down on the problem just by mirroring it.
Yeah,
it's more offensive.
And when I see that, it bothers me. It bothers me. It really does.
So Al Suspiria had a question for you, Mike.
Alt-right, and I'm that, and whatever.
Nah, you're not. You're far from alt-right. Al Suspiria from Russia in Philadelphia asks, did you like Sleepaway Camp 2?
Oh, man. I'm not well versed in the Sleepaway Camp. I think I know I've seen 2. But it was okay. I like the first film just because it's batshit crazy and everybody remembers the ending. Part 2, I have few remember. I know I've rented it back in the day, but I don't think I ever bought it. It's just not one of those movies that I felt like I had to own, but I thought it was okay. Is that the one where they? Well, I know Angela's played by a different actress and different things that go. I can't remember everything that goes on about it. It's beehive in the bathroom type of thing.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of a remake of the original without the reveal because we know the story now.
Yeah.
The third film is kind of this crazy, really cheap thing that kind of has no plot, but it has a lot of great kills. I'm not really the biggest fan of franchises that do that. I prefer like the first film. That franchise works because it's so batshit and crazy, and it does the kind of summer camp slasher thing really pretty well. But then the cheaper sequels I was never a fan of.
Well, I kind of got you off the beaten path there. You were asking me about like the original franchises. I think the original Nightmare on Elm Street is the most effective as far as being horror. Yeah. And I love that movie. I tell you, it's creepy as hell. I watched it. I was a teenager. My parents were out of town. I was stoned out of my mind in a dark room watching that movie, and it really was effective, right?
Yeah,
I loved it. I saw part 2 in the theater. I thought it maintained the darkness, but it broke its own rules. That was the problem I had with the second film. Was the first film set up rules that the second film just totally ignored.
Yeah.
Third film, I liked it for what it was, but I like it less now than I did when I first saw it. But I always go back to the original on Nightmare. I mean, Freddy became a stand-up comic there toward the end.
Yeah.
You're watching comedies, with the Power Globes, whatever. Freddy's dead with the dream demon things. I can't watch that one. I mean, it's a complete. I mean, gross. Can't stand it. And I don't mean gross like it's gross and isn't, it insults my intelligence,
Yep, I agree. So,
So Friday and Halloween are my two. I do enjoy the first Nightmare, and there's a couple other ones. I do like the standalones, like Happy Birthday to Me. I think it's a good Giallo imitator, which it's a solid flick.
talk about a batshit crazy ending. That's a batshit crazy ending.
They dropped the ball on that one, didn't they?
Whoa. I don't think the ball existed. I think that they pretended to drop a ball. There's so many questions I have about the end of that film.
They were making that shit up as they went along.
Absolutely.
I think it's creative. It's dark. I like it.
I love the bike kill. The bike kill is amazing.
And My Bloody Valentine. I like Prom Night, Terror Train. I like all the one-offs. They're not all great, but they're entertaining because I was really into slasher film, and it's like if you like punk rock, you'll listen. Oh, that's a punk band. I'll listen to it. You may not like it as well as your favorite punk band, but it's still punk, right?
Yeah.
It's still punk,
How about Hell Night?
Slashers,
How about Hell Night?
Oh yeah, I love Hell Night. That's almost a creature feature slasher film.
Yeah.
I really like that one. It was the Van Patten kids in it. It kind of annoys me in that movie, but other than that, it's great.
Oh, I just love that. I love everything about that movie. Actually, yeah, it's not the goriest slasher, and I know that's a criticism it receives, but it does so many really cool things. I love that it's a haunted house movie, kind of in drag. I love that. There's a character who escapes, goes to the police station, steals a rifle, and comes back. That is truly insane. I love it. I just love it because characters usually would never do that. In these movies, if someone would never make it out for the first thing, but the idea of going back because you like your friends that you just met that night, it's crazy. It's awesome. I love it.
That's a good point.
Crystal Lake Counselor 77 asks, Halloween 5 or Rise of Skywalker?
I have not seen Rise of Skywalker.
I'm going to give you your answer. Halloween 5. I actually think Halloween 5 is a rushed film, but what they wanted to do with it was really, really, really interesting and good. It's just they rushed that movie out too fast.
My biggest problem with it is the tone. You got Tina, you get the bumbling cops with their own soundtrack, and you got that horrible mask. Part 5. I know he's got that long bent nose, and it doesn't even. It looks like something anybody could steal out of a dollar store. There's no. I don't know if it's necessary to be, screen authentic, but if it's supposed to be the same character and his identifying trait is a certain type of mask, I don't know. I just hated the mask in Part 5, and the tone was everywhere. But I can still watch it.
At some point, I'm going to do a video on it. I don't know if it'll be when I do the entire series or not, but it's basically an attempt to do an American fairy tale in the form of a slasher film. And I know that sounds really bizarre, but it's absolutely what's going on. You'll have to wait for the video for that.
Cool.
Piz just wants to say, get woke to you.
Get woke, go broke, man. That's what they say.
So Griffin says, question for Lauren and Mike, what are your top 3 favorite David Cronenberg films?
Ooh, well, I love Scanners. That's the first one that comes to mind. Let's see. I like The Brood. Not everybody does. I enjoy The Brood.
We're 2 for 2. I might not even have to answer.
And probably going to have to go with Videodrome.
I don't need the answer because we're actually on 100% agreement. I actually wrote my answer down. Whoa, lost the sheet. Right there. Bam. Yeah, I think there's something about early Cronenberg that is extraordinarily powerful. No one was doing body horror with kind of a biological mutation bent the way he was. No one was openly criticizing technology and entertainment and the effect it has on people the way he was doing. He brought that kind of intelligence that now we're seeing siphoned down into A24 films and the new breed of Hammer films. But he was doing it on a very, very personal basis. I just think I always say this. He's the guy who was smart enough to get out of horror. because he never
Yeah.
made that awful film that made us reevaluate. I mean, we love our John Carpenter, but we have to somehow figure out how The Ward and Ghosts of Mars happened. We love our Toby Hooper, but we have to be really kind when we're talking about something like The Mangler. You know what I'm saying? He's the guy that we don't have to do that with. So he came out of it unscathed, I think.
He kind of knew when it was time to quit. Although Ghost of Mars, it's a guilty pleasure of mine as far as I'm a Carpenter fanboy in a way. It's like, even though not all of his films are great, and I would never say they are, he has a certain sense of humor and a certain writing style that I really enjoy. So I can watch Vampires, right? I love that movie. It's so Carpenter as far as his batshit sense of humor, his Western with vampires and James Woods. To me, it's a great flick because it's a Carpenter flick. If somebody else had directed it, maybe not so much. Ghost of Mars should have been Escape from Mars, and Ice Cube's character should have been Snake Plissken, right? I mean, that's obvious to me what it originally
what it started out as, yeah.
Seemed as. I mean, what it turned into was definitely subpar, but I like Escape from LA. I like the attitude and the jokes and the humor and the character. It was like visiting with a friend you haven't seen in years, who maybe isn't as cool as he used to be, but the memories he brings back, you're talking to him, it's like it's still a good time. So I'm a little soft when it comes to Carpenter. Yeah, that's kind of a piece of crap. But
I will just remind everyone that before Natasha Henstridge was brought in at the last moment for Ghosts of Mars, Courtney Love was originally in the role, and she was insisting upon rewriting some of the lines of dialogue. And if you actually see what she was doing, because you can find it online, it's funny because they were more John Carpenter in feel than even the John Carpenter lines, because apparently she's a fan and she's a great songwriter, so it makes sense that but she was just too prickly and on drugs and was not going to do it.
And of course, it was an early role for Jason Statham.
Yep.
Who went on to better things, of course, but I don't know. He had Pam Grier.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there was a good cast there. I mean, and there was a good movie there somewhere. It just
somewhere.
It kind of didn't come out as good as it could have.
I always say that if a different editor was on Vampires, I probably would be a bigger defender of that film than I am. I just think the film is really cut really choppy, and it's disorienting in the action scenes to have to figure out where things are. And
I hate that about editing. That's why I can't stand movies like Gladiator.
Yeah. But again, I think that movie is a movie of its time in that way. John Carpenter's autorial voice is enough to get you through, but I just wish a different editor was involved. So Jacob asks, question, Vice Squad or Miss 45?
Vice Squad, that's the one that's got
Linda Blair.
who plays the bad guy?
Oh no, that's that. I'm sorry. Yeah, no. That's the Baby, I'm Not Gonna Hit You. I'm Just Gonna Love You Like You Deserve. One of the most disingenuous lines of dialogue ever.
But I'm trying to think. Vice Squad. Yeah. It's probably going to be Vice Squad because of the bad guy. I can't remember his name, but he's a B movie. You know, he was in a lot of those type of flicks back in the day. I can't remember his name. But,
I will have to go with Miss 45. I just ordered the Dutch import Blu-ray. I do love that movie. I think it's just so mean-spirited and antisocial that I just love it. Matt is picking on Hell Knight, so I'm not going to put his comment on screen. Consider it censorship as far as I will ever censor anyone, but I read your comment aloud. Okay, DJ Donnelly asks, how would you reach each mask, hockey mask, and person who played Michael J? I'm not asking you to ask them. Just give us your favorite of both.
I already said part 3 is my favorite Jason as far as the hockey mask goes. So I'll go with part 3 Jason and the original Michael.
I would go with
because he specifically said hockey mask, so I have to go with. I can't that leaves out Tater Sack Jason, right? So I have to go with the first one with the mask was the one.
Yeah, listen, original Halloween, 4th Friday 13th. That's an easy one for me. I mean, it's just
I can't go wrong with either way.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Piz is looking for trouble because he says, I love the Mangler. I'm very happy that the Mangler has found its audience member.
I've actually seen that one. I'm glad. It was good to see Robert Englund get a non-Freddy role, and he got a paycheck. Not a great movie.
I saw it as a midnight in a theater, and the audience was not kind to it, and I wasn't having a great time. I've never seen it since, so maybe I should revisit it, but I probably won't. Gibbs is in the chat. He says Ghosts of Mars is good, so he's supporting your contention that Ghosts of Mars is a good film.
I'm saying there's a good movie in there somewhere, damn it, and I do enjoy it.
Uh-oh. Marbsby's bringing the big guns here. Question from Mike and Lauren. Was Wes Craven really a master of horror?
No, not for me. He made a couple of good flicks, but I don't see him as the be-all, end-all of horror. Although I do, like I said, Nightmare on Elm Street, great flick. I do like, is Hills Have Eyes really a horror film? It's a great film.
I think it is. I mean, by my definition, it is, but I use a pretty wide bucket definition. I think he's
on the left. He was involved in that. That's more, torture, rape, exploitation. I guess it counts as horror.
Yeah.
But then after the original Nightmare,
it gets harder.
It gets harder. I mean, so he's got 3 films. Does that make you a master?
Well, so I think we're on page with each other here, but we're not going to be on page with people in the chat, I think.
Oh, that's fine.
I love the 3 films that you point to. Last House, Hills Have Eyes, original Nightmare on Elm Street. I think you and I both don't kind of like where the horrors went in the late 80s. The joking, MTV kind of look and feel, the ultra trying to be hip and trying to be funny horror.
I think on The Factory, I even said the first time I saw Scream, it actually pissed me off because I felt like it was making fun of fans like me for seriously enjoying those films, because it was having a laugh at all the tropes of those films, while at the same time kind of making fun of the audience of those films, trying to be tragically hip or something. And I eventually do like the first Scream, but the rest of the series I can do without. But I do like, what was that movie he made about voodoo? With
Serpent in the Rainbow, which is where I was going. Yes, I think
like
that's
that movie. I don't consider it to be really horror, but it's kind of horror.
It's horror adjacent, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like Shocker. I don't like Vampire in Brooklyn. I don't like the Scream series as it is. I don't like Soul to Take. I mean, there's I don't even like some early stuff too. Your Deadly Blessing, I'm not a fan. I think he's one of those guys that maybe it's because he has such a clever name to work in the genre, but
horror maven Wes Craven, it kind of rhymes, and we kind of gave him
a leg up. But I'm a broken record here, but I will take the entire work of Sean Cunningham, and I think film per film, I give him the advantage over Wes Craven any day of the week. And the fact that 2 came out together and worked on each other's films, the fact that Cunningham filmed some of Nightmare on Elm Street, including some of the iconic dream sequences, I don't know. It's hard for me to have quite the reverence for Wes Craven that others apparently do.
Well, I would definitely, support anybody's opinion of him. I think he's done a good enough job with a number of films for me to respect him.
Yeah.
But he's definitely like Argento. He's the tale of 2 decades. It's Argento's first run of films are really good, and then they get really bad.
Yeah. So what is that? Where does that end for you? Actually, the Argento thing. For me, it's with Stendhal. That's the last, I think, great.
I did like what's the one where the heads get chopped off and they still talk? The whole concept. Was it
Trauma? Yeah.
I like that film. I like the whole concept behind how long does the head live after it's been removed from the body. Sick shit like that. I think it's great. I love Italian horror. That's another thing from my childhood. Watching, those movies on late night TV and whatnot. I always loved the Italian stuff. I loved Italian westerns. They're always more intense, and the loud music and the action and the blood and the gore, and they really just like throw everything at the screen. It's like, we're gonna make you like this movie, whether you want to or not. It's like, okay. Movie was awesome when I was a kid. But yeah, anything Italian from like the 70s, I'm really into.
Chris Lake Counselor 77 asks, would you rather have a beer with Donald Pleasance or Christopher Lee?
I'm not really much for meeting idols, I'm so afraid of being disappointed because if you ask them the wrong question and they turn into a prick on you, then what, you're just going to awkwardly stare at each other while you finish your beer, or you're going to get up and leave. I don't know. Christopher Lee obviously is the more iconic of the two for horror fans, I think, even though Pleasance has made, some pretty iconic films himself outside of being Loomis. I mean, he was in some other horror films, lesser known ones.
Freakmaster, all the way. Freakmaster, all day.
Was he in a movie like Raw Meat or something?
Yeah, it's about the subway system in London.
Yeah, I remember from stuff like that. I kind of rather have a talk with Donald Pleasance, like maybe he might be more of an everyman and less of a arrogant prick. But I kind of think that Christopher Lee earned being an arrogant prick, so it's like I could be mad at him. But who would give better conversation? I don't. As long as you stayed away from Halloween, I think Donald Pleasance might be the better. Now talk about Escape from New York. Talk about Raw Meat. Talk about the Bond films or something. You might have a good conversation with Mr. Pleasance.
So Griffin is asking a question that's not a top of the head question. Well, who are our top 3 favorite film directors, and name your favorite film from them? My thing about answering this question is that ultimately it's tough because my favorite films don't necessarily map to my favorite directors. So it feels like a betrayal to me to even answer it. Well, for instance, Natural Born Killers is one of my favorite films, but I wouldn't consider.
And then just pick a film of theirs that I enjoyed the most. I'd have to go like more contemporary or more would be Spielberg. He's definitely an architect of my youth. He made some great films, and I'd have to go Jaws, which to me is still his best film. Carpenter. It's so easy to say Halloween, and I have to say Halloween when I say Carpenter, but I still enjoy like Escape from New York and Big Trouble in Little China. I like so many of his movies, but I have to go Halloween. Third, I loved Romero's wit, his sense of humor, and how he could put a societal message in. He could put like a political message in his movies and not feel like he's preaching at you. So Dawn of the Dead for him, because I love, even though I am a capitalist and a consumer, I got the humor of Dawn of the Dead and how that type of thing can be taken too far. And the 80s proved
it. See, this is. I'll give 2 answers. I'm not going to give 3 because I can't. This question is not something I can answer easily. I'll say that Jacques Tourneur, Cat People, James Whale, Bride of Frankenstein. I think if you look at both men's work all the way through, they were consummate professionals that always delivered. Thoughtful films in a genre that has not always been thoughtful. Great looking films that have endured and probably mean more today than they did even when they were released. And I know those aren't sexy answers. You want me to say, Sean?
Kubrick is another one. I could say Sergio Leone. I could say,
right.
There's a handful of Italian directors I could say. I could go back to the old days and Howard Hawks. He was a great director. John Ford. He made some good movies too. I mean, Cecil B. DeMille made a couple of good ones, I think, as well. Yeah. Like, who do you really pick? Well, I have to go with the ones that had the biggest immediate impact on my young life, and that would be Spielberg, Romero, and Carpenter. Although those other ones are just, it's hard to say one's better than the other. They all did great work.
So Christian has been trying to get this question through, but apparently I keep missing it. So I will not miss it this time, Christian. Don't you worry, we got you, man. Favorite zombie movie and thought on the genre?
If there's ever a genre I'm completely done with, it's the zombie film. I think Rambo Rap in his review of The Horde rant review that he put out recently, kind of, how many zombie movies are there? 1 million? I mean,
Something
it's
like
probably
that.
one of the most flooded subgenres of horror. It's so easy to say, oh, like Dawn of the Dead, right? The Dead trilogy, Day of the Dead. I like Return of the Living Dead, but that's more of a comedy. But I still like it. I'm gonna have to go with Dawn of the Dead. It's a boring answer, but it was Night of the Living Dead is technically the first one I saw, and I loved that movie. And you want to talk about politics and societal issues? That movie handled it with class, right? That was the first. You see, the black guy is the lead guy, and he takes charge, and he's got the right answers, and you know what I mean. If you look back at it with knowing what was going on in prior years to that film, it was very brave and very well done. Much better than what they consider woke films nowadays. But yeah, when I was a little kid, I didn't even really notice that theme. I just accepted it for what it was because I wasn't raised, even though, I don't want to get too far into it, but even though I wasn't raised to be minded that way as far as hating people, it didn't seem like a stretch for that character to be in charge. He seemed like the guy with the right answer. And I'm a merit-based person. Whoever's the best person for the job should get the job if you want to get the job done right, And I think that's one thing we should really, as a society, get back to. I don't give a shit what your sex organs are or what you like or what color you are. If you're the best person for the job, do the damn job because we need you.
Yeah.
If you want to make the world what it should be, let the right people lead then, don't play the games, and I thought that movie was a perfect example of, what a world like that could be, Although I did catch, did they shoot him because they thought he was a zombie or did they shoot him because he was black? I think if you watch it at the end of that movie, it's there's stereotypes and that might have been a little bit of a cop out, but it's a powerful film, no matter how you look at it, especially considering it was created and released. Well, it was released in October of 1968, and so was I. It's like my birth year film.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a ton of zombie films I love. I mean, Night of the Living Dead, I Walk with a Zombie, Zombie 2, Return of the Living Dead. I mean, there's a ton of them. It's interesting because no zombie film really reaches very high on my list of favorite films, just because I think that as a monster goes, it's the least personal. It's about society. It's not about a specific thing. And, Train to Busan definitely needs to be considered as a serious entry. I'm hoping Peninsula is worth the hype it's getting right now, but we'll find out. I don't know. It's hard for me to say a favorite. Probably Night of the Living Dead at the end of the day. I don't know if that's really what anyone wants to hear. Griffin asked a question from me, but Mike, you are more than willing to, if you're more than welcome to jump in if you have anything to say. He asks, what do you think of Out of the Past from Jacques Tourneur? I think that I'm not as big a noir fan as a lot of people. Obviously, Robert Mitchum is an amazing actor, and everything he was ever in was pretty much top of the heap. But I don't have any great passion for it. I don't know what else to say. I think we lost Mike. Hopefully he'll be able to come back with us in a second. So what I'm going to do, guys, while Mike works out his sound issues, I'm going to talk about what's coming up next on the show. I usually have someone to help me with that question, but I don't. So I hope all of you will be able to join us on Thursday when we will return with a very special guest. So yeah, we will be joined by Steak Sauce. Ooh, that's right in my way. We will be joined by Steak Sauce on Thursday, and we will be talking about from a fan perspective. We'll also be talking about his launch of a new podcast, and as this show has always been, it is meant as a forum to get more voices heard by more people. So Steak Sauce, I think, is one of those guys that is 100% genuine every moment he lives and breathes. So he's exactly who I think we need at the moment to come in here and give us a perspective for where his feet hit the ground. And it looks like Mike was unable to resolve his... oh, wait, maybe. Are you back, sir?
And I'm back.
Oh, wow. And higher volume than you were. I just showed the promo for next week's show where we have Steak Sauce on. Mike, there's really only one thing I have left in my notes to go over with you, and I think this is a critical one for you and I. Horror to me as a genre has always relied on a great score. Every film that I really love in the genre has music that I associate with the movie strongly. It just seems to be the one genre where I can't separate out. I can't tell you in other genres, besides maybe Westerns, another genre where music and the films are so inseparable. What are some of your favorite scores?
Again, that's probably going to be, I hate to be too generic, but how can I not mention the score to Jaws or anything John Williams has done? He's probably one of the most prolific, from Jurassic Park and Star Wars and, Indiana Jones. I mean, he's done so many iconic film scores. But horror, of course, John Carpenter is, again, that's an easy choice, but I love his music. What he did with Halloween, like you said, he showed the film Halloween without music and nobody liked it. And then he showed it with the soundtrack and everybody was like, thought it was brilliant. Friday the 13th. That movie without that music would not be as effective. Alien had a great score. Maybe to a lesser extent, but like I said, I like Italian cinema and I like the band Goblin. I think they did a lot to add to a certain feel of the film. Maybe not as much as, in a more, not maybe in a contemporary way, but in a way that just makes it that, you're watching one of those movies when you hear Goblin. So yeah, Carpenter, John Williams, anything they've done as far as music goes, Alien, Nightmare on Elm Street, another great soundtrack. Music really kind of makes it. I mean, I know those are generic examples, but I can't just not say it,
Yeah, I mean, I find myself finding that the films that I really love in the genre, music is a big part of it. So it's like not a coincidence. Some of my favorite films are also my favorite scores. So I mean, Goblin score to Suspiria, for instance, to me, I can't imagine Suspiria without that score. And I never want to experience it. Colin Towns' score to Haunting of Julia, which I consider the scariest film ever made, for me personally. That movie's score is incredibly moving and haunting, just like the movie is. George Deaton's score for the original Toolbox Murders is so underrated. I think it's one of the great horror scores, and no one ever talks about it because it's for a one-off film, and he didn't do a lot else inside the genre. But more recently, both Bear McCreary, who everyone knows is the Walking Dead composer, he scored Hellfest, and you know what? He did an amazing job of setting that Halloween theme park mood for me. It's kind of perfect, and that's one of the reasons I love that movie so much. Same thing. Everyone knows I love the movie Game Over. Ethan Johan's score for that movie is playful and it evokes old video games as it should. And it's kind of a brilliant way to just enhance the existing movie and play on all the themes in the movie. So I think that we have a dearth of newer scores that really are as iconic. And I wish that would change because I think we'd appreciate the cinema we are getting a whole lot more.
Yeah. I remember, even though Carpenter didn't do it, it sounds like a Carpenter score, but the score to The Thing.
It's
the original,
Morricone.
yeah. But, and people don't realize that that's a remake of a earlier film. Of course, it was a 50s film with James Arness of Gunsmoke fame as like a vegetable alien guy. It's really nothing. It's way more like the story than it is the original film. But to me, that movie's still a masterpiece. That's was still one of my favorites. I love The Thing. Well written, good characters, great music. And besides the gore effects, I mean, sure, it's a geek show when it comes to the gore, but it looks great, and the characters are great, and the music's great. It's just an all-around great film.
Yeah. So Matt is saying that the score to The Fog is wicked. I agree. It's actually my favorite Carpy score.
Yeah.
Jacob is saying Ennio Morricone's theme to the Psychic is the best horror theme ever. I like it a lot. Give Colin Towns' Haunting of Julia a spin if you like that, because you might like it as well. Marv's B saying Morricone is the best film composer in the history of cinema. He might be. He's definitely in the short list for it. Rush is agreeing. And wow, a lot of love for Morricone.
Cool.
Yeah. Griffin says Jerry Goldsmith's score to First Blood just fills me with so much sorrow. That score has stuck with me most of my life. And similarly, Riz Ortolani's score for Cannibal Holocaust is one of the most brilliantly subversive uses of a sorrowful, sad score in a film that you wouldn't normally, score that way. McCreary scored Cloverfield Lane. Yeah, his scores for Cloverfield Lane and Hellfest are very distinctive. Yes, they are. I think he's one of those guys, man. He also does a ton of work for television. He just is a workaholic and a half. You look at his website; it's always updating, like with 6 different projects he's working on. Matt asks, "Have you guys seen Kung Fury?"
I think so.
I did. It was fun.
But I can't remember which one it is, though. I mean, I've seen a lot of those kind of imitation, making fun of the old school karate films, the Hong Kong films. But is that the one where the guy takes like the 2 animals and turns them into nunchucks, and it's like really crazy? I can't remember.
I don't remember that. It's the time travel one where he goes back in time, and it's more like a buddy cop thing, kind of. With a karate cop.
I mean, I've seen so many films that a film by the name of Kung Fury. I don't know. Is it like a feature length film, or is it that short one that was going around?
Yeah, it's like a 22-minute film or something.
Okay, yeah, I've seen that one. I thought it was fun.
Fun. I don't know if I could sustain myself on it, but fun. DJ Donnelly asks, "Is Psycho the first slasher film?"
I don't know. Is what's the one that came before that? I mean, it depends on who you ask. What Peeping Tom?
Yeah, well, Peeping Tom, yeah, but I'd go Night of Terror, 1933. That would be my first.
Yeah,
but someone will find something before that. That's
right, exactly.
Now, there's no authority on this. Believe me.
Did Psycho, bring a wider audience to the concept of the slasher film? Definitely. Black Christmas was actually probably the proto of the 80s slashers. I mean, without Black Christmas, I don't know if we would have had Halloween. Black Christmas is another movie that handles political themes and social issues of the time in a very adult and well-written way. And I enjoy that movie. And I like the fact that we don't know who the killer is. We don't find out the motivation. And he's still there at the end of the movie. And there's a woman in the house alone with him. And the movie just ends. That to me, I love that. It's a great flick.
So here's a tougher one. Well, I just lost it because the chat's actually moving faster than my fingers. What is your favorite film score from Tangerine Dream?
I don't know if I have one. I'm trying to think of the movies I actually remembered that they did a score to.
Well,
I know I've
Dune,
seen
right?
one.
They did Dune, right? I might have to look this up. I hate to say that, but
Yeah.
um, I have to admit this. Maybe this is where the better answer for this question is. I'm not the biggest synth guy. Some great work has been done with synth, but I am usually more fond of small band or orchestra work. And the occasional like outright rock score is usually going to win me over. Um, People always talk about Return of the Living Dead, and there's synth in the actual score to Return of the Living Dead, but there's also discordant guitars and other things. I think that stuff is always more interesting to me than just an out of the box synth composition.
Yeah, Carpenter does great work, and Alan Holdsworth, his partner. I think maybe Alan is actually the brains behind the synth, whereas Carpenter kind of brings the ideas, and then Alan's like, well, let's try it with this thing, and let's do that. So that's a good synth team there, those two guys, because they've made some really good scores.
Do you have a favorite?
I've been messing with synthesizer here. I used to be completely anti-synth because I was a guitar player, still am. And to me, that pop synth stuff of the 80s was just completely cotton candy crap. That it just ruled the airwaves. And any rock band that had a synthesizer in it, it's like they only had it to sweeten the music so that the girls would like it so they could sell more records, but it completely cut the balls off of the guitars. It's, except for like maybe a band like Night Ranger, but I was a huge fan of Brad Gillis when he was in Ozzy. Hell of a guitar player. And their second guitar player was kick-ass too. He could do that 8-finger tapping shit. But then they got their biggest song is Sister Christian, which is a piano ballad with like a 5-second solo. So it's hard for me to hate on them because they've got two of the greatest guitar players of the 80s, but it's also the synth-driven pop stuff that kind of just whacks the balls right off of it. But being an older person, I'm more intrigued by it now because after I've reached the point of, well, how much can you do with bass drums and guitar? That hasn't already been done. I mean, AC/DC made 23 albums with the same 3 chords? Great. What can I do with it? I mean, I can't do nothing better than they did. It's just going to sound like something they would have done better. So I've kind of incorporated some synth into my goofing around, and I'm enjoying it. But to me, Carpenter and his partner kind of cornered the market on the synth scores for me. Although I did like some of that cheesy, the Warrior of the Wasteland and those crazy ass apocalyptic movies from the 80s, and they're uber cheesy synth scores, but that was just for cheese factor, not for like talent, It's like you heard that. Oh, this is going to be good. This is going to be titties and beer right here. It's not going to be a great flick, but it's going to be fun.
I would say that the funny thing is, like, if you look at the Carpenter / Alan Howarth thing, I love the score to Halloween 5. I think because it has all those weird whooshes and orchestra hits and crap, and it's very synthetic, but it feels really good in that movie. I love what John Ottman tried to do when he tried to make an orchestral version of the Halloween score. Of course, they didn't use his score for the film, which is disaster. They just recycled Scream music. But I generally speaking, I kind of am annoyed by the movement right now to try and create like those minimalist synth scores for modern movies, and kind of it's just endless nostalgia for the 80s, and I'm just not that nostalgic. I'm constantly searching out new that excites me as much as I want to feel how I felt back then, but I don't want to feel like I'm reaching back to get that feeling. So I guess that's my big issue with synths in general. Is there someplace we can hear you? Is there someplace we can hear your music, Mike?
I'm working on some new stuff. I'm not done with it yet, but I'm working on a project that I'm gonna do the full digital distribution website, the whole 9 yards, just for the hell of it, because it's like I'm not just a person. I've been playing guitar since 1983, so it's not just what I do; it's part of who I am. So I play every day. So I was like, yeah, I might as well record something and, run it up the flagpole and see if anybody gives a shit. Then my kid's kind of interested in the synth type thing. So I got a synthesizer and I got a guitar and we got Ableton Live and I got a pedal board and we're just going to, it's going to be instrumental, crazy shit. I don't know what it's going to sound like. We're working on some stuff, but it's going to be a good time. I'm going to learn something. I'm going to learn something. I'm going to spend some quality time with my kid and I'm going to have a lot of fun. And if anybody likes it, great. If not, that's great too. But probably try to launch something around the beginning of next year.
That's awesome.
I got some older stuff that I wrote, but it's not really worth, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. If you write something and you don't like it and you don't think it's good enough, you don't really want anybody else to hear it because you know how people are with the snapshot, right? It's like once they hear one thing,
that's
forever,
what it is.
That's what they remember.
That's what it is.
Oh, you're that one guy that wrote that terrible song,
Yeah.
I don't know. I've written some cool stuff, but that's behind and I'm moving forward. It's going to be crazy and I'm going to enjoy it.
Awesome. So where can people just keep up with you though? Is there social networking or anything like that where we can?
I'm terrible with the social media stuff because it's just so. It is what it is. I do have a Twitter at B Movie Mike. I got a Facebook, but I usually keep that for just people I actually know. That's just the people I've actually known, met, spent time with. That's more of my keeping in touch with people I've known for 30 years more than it is new people. And I'm not truly at my age. It's like if I make a few new friends, that's cool, but not really necessary. I don't know. I don't know.
Well,
getting old.
I will. Well, we're both getting old. This is what I'd say to you, man, though. From the time I joined what was the Sausage Factory, now Region Free, every episode that you weren't on, it didn't take long in the chat for people to ask where you were and when we'd see you again. So thank you so much for coming on tonight. I think you made a lot of people happy. I love this conversation. You and I need to get back together and just do a music episode, man. And that's clear as day to me. So I hope we can see you soon.
Yeah, I will. Like I told you in the green room, I guess they call it. I may not be able to be on every episode of Region Free, but we have a huge cast, so it's kind of nice to kind of cycle people in and out. So it's not the same people yelling about the same thing all the time. Different opinions and things are good. But I'll be on there occasionally whenever I get the opportunity. But I do appreciate everybody, for whatever reason, giving a shit about what I think. I don't know. I don't know why. Maybe it's my unfiltered, honesty, where I just really don't give a shit what people think about me for what I say, which is becoming rare, which shouldn't be. Everybody, should not be afraid to speak their mind about something, regardless of how it's received, because like somebody said, it's like, I can't control how you interpret what I say, but I'm not going to let that control what I say. Now, I don't purposely go out of my way to insult people or berate people or, be hateful, but sometimes certain language needs to be used, and I'm the guy that's not afraid to do it. I guess I'm a thought criminal, and to echo Revenge of the Nerds, I'm a thought criminal, and I'm pretty proud of that.
I have nothing that I can add to that that's going to make it any better. So to all my fellow thought criminals out there, hope to see you on Thursday. Have a great rest of your week.